Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. You're about to watch a replay of our Tuesday night Twitch stream, the $1 Million Mission Week 9 edition. This past week on FanDuel on the Week 9 main slate, I took home nearly $65,000 over 3 different contests. So in this $1 Million Mission, we talked about my big lineup that won most of the money, the strategies I used, and then we also unveiled a new tournament theory on how to build tournament lineups to help get you to the top of your leaderboards. So this is an evergreen video. While we did review some lineups from week 9, we talk about strategies and topics that can help you for any NFL DFS slate that you play. Twitch.tv/Occupy Fantasy is where we go live every Tuesday night, where we review my previous week's 150 NFL DFS lineups and take your questions about tournament strategy. So sit back, enjoy, take notes.
What's up? What's going on, everybody? It is Moose and Brian here from OccupyFantasy.com, at Occupy Fantasy on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. We always talk about it, Brian. You know, down, and then spike. And today, or last week, was one of those spike weeks for you.
Hashtag spike week. We got it. We always get a couple per season. This one was almost off the computer screen spike, and we'll get into that. But yeah, coming off a good week, so excited to be here.
Absolutely. So what's up, Ken? Did the weird, like, scrunched up Occupy logo? I'll take it. Yep. Star-Lord's dad, subscribed for 6 months. Glad you're here. T Nasty, what's up? Wig, Bismo, Random Rules, what's up, everybody? Glad that you're here. I think that might be the next emote, Spike Week.
Yeah, like just a chart just going off the screen.
Yeah, definitely. What's up, Jake? So we're here, week 9 of the $1 Million Mission. For those who don't know, Brian, can you explain what the $1 Million Mission is?
Yeah, every week, unless it's election week, we review my previous week's 150 NFL DFS lineups. Take your questions about lineup builder settings, 20 max and 150 max NFL DFS strategy. Review my lineups. We look at what winning lineups did. And then we always have some sort of high-level discussion about whether it's contest selection or stacking or player selection or whatever it may be. We got an even I've been kicking around this theory that looks pretty good. We got to dig into some more data, but a pretty eye-opening theory for DraftKings tournaments too that we'll talk about later.
Yeah, I love Jake saying, "I'm tired of losing. Need a secret breakthrough," as he's on just absolute heater season.
Dude, cool this guy off. God, I don't know if who those who've been watching Jake, longtime member, just dominating. He took home a few K in MMA Saturday, won the members contest on Sunday for Occupy, plus obviously some other contests, and then won a few K more on Showdown on Monday night. So, damn, dude, spread the love.
Must be nice. So, so again, for full transparency, Brian, we like to show how much you entered, how much you won, ROI, all that stuff like that. So on the different sites of FanDuel and DraftKings. So we'll start with DraftKings first. I'll get the logo out the way. And I hope this shows up correctly. On DraftKings, let me move this up a little bit. Oh, where is it? Yeah, so on week 9 for DraftKings, 1350 in entries, 1029 in winnings for an ROI of minus 24%. Not the worst, not the best. We go ahead.
Not the best, and again, this one, as you switch to FanDuel, obviously a much bigger difference and very similar lineup sets. So this was just another week that just added to my thinking of why am I not doing as well on DraftKings as I have been doing on FanDuel.
Yeah, and as we switch over to FanDuel, Brian, we've talked about it before in different staff chats and stuff, but your FanDuel NFL is one of your most profitable sports. FanDuel NFL on that particular site, and for whatever reasons, we'll get to it maybe later. But 24.66 in entries, 64.K9 in winnings, for a pretty good 25-33% ROI.
Pretty decent, right? Pretty decent. Yeah. So a little context here. So I enter pretty much every week. I'll enter because of FanDuel's different GPPs. We've talked about maximizing your ROI on different contest types for each lineup, and I kind of do the same thing. Obviously, very high risk approach, but I'll enter my 150 lineups into the $4 milli on FanDuel just because I want that chance at $1 million, which we'll talk about here in a second. I enter the $3 GPP, the snap, just because pretty balanced payouts, a chance at 20K. And then I'll enter the $9 rush GPP, which is a very high risk again, 50 or 100K up top, depending on which week it is. So this week I got first in the $9, or I guess it was $10, $9.99, the rush for 50K. Got second in the snap for 10K. And then had the ultimate sweat moose in the millie, got up to 7th. And I would probably say I was the favorite to win the millie late in the fourth quarter of the Arizona game. 4 points away from first with the only lineup with 4 players left. And just everything went wrong in that Arizona game. So
yeah, rip, Brian. I think you went away from me for a second, so I guess I'll pick it up here. Yeah, as Brian talked about, he had 3 players from Atlanta and 1 player from Miami, which sucks. So that's not good. Brian, let me know when you get back. And I don't know what happened to the cameras. I don't know, but hey, we'll talk about it. If we take a look at both sites year to date, we can go ahead and look. $20 million mission, 27.6K in entries, 88.6K in winnings for a 221% ROI. Let's see. We're trying to fix the cameras here. I don't know what happened, but hey. Yeah, and as Brian talks about, we're about to unveil the strat, so not sure when. I will be. Oh, there we go. We're back.
all right, we're back.
We're back. Cool. So, yeah. So I just talking about your $20 million mission year to date, a 221% ROI.
Yeah. So I don't know where we cut off. If someone in the chat could let us know where we cut off talking.
Well, no, I think we were still able to talk. It's just our cameras went out.
Oh.
Or at least I was able to talk at least.
So yeah, let me know, guys, what you think. But yeah, so it's 27K in entries, 88K in winnings, 221% ROI. Very, very nice so far. Feel like I'm just getting into the groove with NFL lineups. We got closed a couple weeks ago. Finally hit. So yeah, so I guess what I was saying, I had 4 players left in the Arizona game, Arizona stack moves. If you want to bring up that lineup, we can discuss it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, so a couple lineups ahead of me had Kyler Murray and Christian Kirk. No one ahead of me had Chase Edmonds. Obviously, no one ahead of me had Jakeem Grant. So we were looking good, man, with Arizona driving to tie the game or take the lead with a few minutes left. Just needed a couple points. 1 or 2 points would have got me up 100K. And then their buttholes pucker, and they do some terrible play calling on 3rd and 1, play for a field goal, missed the field goal, Miami runs the clock out, and I'm a couple points short from the millie. So pretty disappointing result, but I'm very happy with this lineup overall.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it sucks that you were probably the favorite to win another $1 million, but you have to be at least thankful that, hey, I got 60-something thousand out of it.
For sure. And it was actually our dad, when I was talking to him the other day, he was like, well, you're 1 for 2 on millie chances. Hard to really complain about that. And if you put it that way, it's probably a good point.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. And as Bisman points out, yeah, imagine having less than 220% ROI.
Couldn't be me.
Yeah.
Could not be me.
No.
Yeah, so the streak continues. So looking good. And yeah, what were you going to say, Moose?
I would say real quick, I do, just because Bismo puts a lot of work into it, I do just want to show his chart real quick that he makes every week for us.
I really wish, aside from the financial aspect, I wish that I did hit the millie just so this chart could just be insane looking.
Yeah. Hashtag Spike Week. So, shock about it. Down, 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 up. That's week in Spike Week 5, which wasn't that big in the grand scheme of things. Down, 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 Spike Week.
Yeah, let's see if we can get another Spike Week in here before the season's over. And maybe before all the downs. Let's just get another Spike Week this week. How's that sound?
Yeah, that works. Yeah. Keep it coming. Cool. So, yeah. So, as we go back, how do you want to take this, Brian? I can pull up the Fantasy Labs contest dashboard. Do you want to talk about the strat first, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, I think let's talk about it. I think we got enough people in here we want to talk about. Jake did ask what happened week 1. That's very typical. I'm so bad week 1 NFL.
There's no underperforming wide receivers.
Yeah, that's the other. I don't have that cheat code in my back pocket to utilize. So, Musa, I talked it out with you. I talked it out with a few people about this strategy, and I think it makes a ton of sense. So basically how it started, right? We talk about my ROI on FanDuel for NFL Classic. This is main slate only. Is way higher on FanDuel than it is on DraftKings.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy because the weeks I crush on FanDuel, despite having similar strategies, don't do as well on DraftKings. In fact, I don't think I've ever had a true sweat for NFL Classic on DraftKings. I've had some good lineups, got near the top, but I've never had like a real true sweat. And so it got to me thinking, it's like, what is going on? Like, how can I break this wall? I feel like I'm just banging my head against the wall in DraftKings. So, I dug into it a little more, and obviously, Moose, there are a couple differences between FanDuel and DraftKings, right? So FanDuel, the half-point PPR scoring. 2, the prices are just looser on FanDuel. DraftKings pricing is really tight. FanDuel, you can fit basically whoever you want all the time, so that's obviously easier. And then 3, the salary ranges, right? On DraftKings, you have a positional player anywhere between 3K and 10K. Where on FanDuel, it's like, 5K, 4,500 to 9 or 10K.
Yeah.
So that changes something as well. And so that alone should mean you should be doing something different with DraftKings. I think identifying high-scoring game environments is still very important, and likely going to be the same game environments that you identify for your FanDuel GPP stacks. But it just got me to thinking, right? Like, because for me, if I use the DFS Magic Lineup Builder, my custom stacks, I'm very in depth on them, right? I want 10% of my Kansas City, Carolina stacks to be Mahomes, Tyreek, Kelsey, McCaffrey. I want the next 10% to be Mahomes, Tyreek, Kelsey, Curtis Samuel, whatever it may be, right? And for me, I've been doing basically the same custom rules on both sites, but the same custom stacks, despite different pricing, despite different scoring requirements. And as a result, every single week I always notice this, and I just, in my head, not thinking, it's like I always need cheaper receivers outside of my stacks to make these stacks work. So I got to get 10 to 15% Michael Gallup this week. I got to get 10 to 15% Darnell Mooney. And every time it's like, okay, I'm looking for cheap options outside my stack that can help me fit these stacks in. And just like epiphany the other day, it's like, why am I doing this? Like, why should I be forcing these cheap receivers in? So the theory I've come up with, and again, this is mostly for DraftKings. It also doesn't apply on weeks where there are lock button cheap plays. So like, it probably won't even apply this week because we're likely to have min price Mike Davis. We had min price Jamal Williams the other week. It didn't apply. Basically, instead of trying to fit in cheap options outside your stack, the new theory, especially for DraftKings, keep the same game stacks that you do, right? If you like Kansas City, Carolina, include at least one cheaper player in your stack. Your 3x1, still 3x1 stack, include one cheaper player in your stack. So instead of forcing in Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill, at least all of your Kansas City, Carolina stacks have to have, whether it's Curtis Samuel, who's cheap, Demarcus Robinson, who's cheap, or Mecole Hardman, who's cheap. Forcing one of those into all your stacks. And or like a more balanced stack, like the Jacksonville-Houston game this past week was a much more balanced stack. Basically having a balanced stack or at least one cheap player. That way, you're not trying to find all these cheap options outside your stack. At least play a cheap option that has a good quarterback with added upside of correlation in a game environment you've already identified as likely high scoring. So moving forward on DraftKings, we can talk about this a little more in depth. My stack either has to be balanced, no expensive players, or if it does, include at least one cheaper player in every 3x1 stack.
Yeah, and not to say just hashtag bad plays only, but I think you hit on it right there when you mentioned it just very briefly. If you're going to play a cheaper player who doesn't have the bet, may have a great upside, but like medium projections suck, whatever you want to say, it's best to have in a vacuum. If you have a player who is, let's say, 5,000, whatever, very cheap, you want them to have some sort of correlation because they're not that good. So the probability of them popping off solo is a lot more difficult than it would be if they're in a stack.
Yeah, exactly. So like normally, like we're not trying to play, like a lot of people are naming names here in the chat. You know, David Moore from Seattle, Kendrick Bourne, Mohamed Sanu when he was with Atlanta, some of these other guys, right? Gabriel Davis, like super cheap options outside. Like in a vacuum, they're not a great play, right? They're going to get a handful of targets, but instead of playing a 3 or 4 or 5K receiver or getting less exposure to the high price running backs and getting lesser running backs instead, why not just play a receiver that has a good quarterback instead of getting receivers that are getting the ball thrown to them by like Garrett Gilbert and Nick Foles or whatever? You can still use those guys in your more expensive stacks, but don't use all of them, and get the added upside. So what it allows you to do, and this is the way I think about it, and I don't know if I'm going to convey this properly. So let's just say, for example, this very simplified version if we're thinking Seattle stack, David Moore, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Russell Wilson, we're thinking these guys.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at last week, 3% of lineups, 3% had Russell Wilson plus DK Metcalf.
Okay.
Around 1% had Russell Wilson plus David Moore. Sorry, it was 3.5% for DK Metcalf. So you're thinking, like, is DK Metcalf 3.5 times more likely to score more points than David Moore? All things considered, probably so. But when you consider the upgrade that playing David Moore has compared to what DK Metcalf has, the question then becomes, again, very simplified version, does Russ plus DK plus a super cheap, shitty receiver have a 3.5 times more likelihood of scoring more points than Russ plus David Moore plus an actually good player like Dalvin Cook or whoever? The answer is probably not 3.5 times. In fact, the David Moore side is probably more likely.
Yeah.
So, again, and this is very slate specific, very stack specific. We're not even going to do it this week with min price Mike Davis. That allows us to jam Mike Davis in and fit whatever stacks in we want. But on weeks where we don't have those easy plays outside of stacks, then we start to look and see where can we save money inside of stacks.
Yeah, and as AJ points out, the strat should have worked more last year with Keyshawn Johnson. We certainly tried.
We definitely did try. We 100% tried. It wasn't without effort, for sure.
Definitely. Qualkites, thank you for the subscription. Subscribe for 8 months. What's up, man? Yeah, and as Willie points out, I felt the pain of this when trying to stack Seattle, going Lockett, DK with Diggs, bring back. You literally couldn't get Cook or Metcalf.
Yeah, like you couldn't do that. You couldn't do it. And that feels good, right? These are the best players in the games that we've identified to score a bunch of points. So if we've identified the studs to score a bunch of points or the game to score 60 or more points, wouldn't by default, if all these guys are scoring, that these cheaper players have more opportunities too? Mm-hmm. And they do. And it would really solidify for me. This is purely anecdotal. We still haven't done data analysis on this yet. I think a lot of the findings are going to verify what we think here. But on DraftKings, all of my good weeks, and I put that in quotes because I haven't had a fantastic NFL Classic week in DraftKings in a while. All the good weeks are when I can lock button easy plays outside of stacks. Jalen Samuels last year, Jamal Williams a couple weeks ago. Pretty much every other week has been bad or average. And inside those bad or average weeks, my lineups that have gotten near the top 1%, have been cheap stacks. And again, this is purely anecdotal. Look at all my big wins on FanDuel. This past week, Christian Kirk instead of DeAndre Hopkins. 250K win was Curtis Samuel instead of CMC inside of a stack. 100K win was lock button Jalen Samuel, so a little bit different. But it's pretty eye-opening to me, and the fact that we can still apply it to FanDuel some, but based on all the intricacies of DraftKings pricing and scoring, it just makes that much more sense to include those cheap guys because you're going to have to get a cheap guy somewhere unless you have a balanced stack. Mm-hmm. So this is mostly for these expensive quarterbacks, expensive game environments. When you have Houston, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Cleveland, it's much easier to do this.
Damn, okay.
And you do it without even thinking about it.
just throw Cincinnati under the bus like that.
I'm just saying, when you can get AJ Green for 4,500 and T Higgins for 4,700 and Joe Burrow for 5,800, it's no brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Nolan points out, if you get a high-scoring game, some shitty guy for sure will be going off. And more eloquently, rising tides floats all boats.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, much more eloquently said. For sure. I mean, how many times have you stacked a game and you're like, God damn it, I can't believe the cheap tight end scored. Or I can't believe the wide receiver 3 scored. I got DK and Lockett, but of course David Moore scored. Like that happens a lot of times. So for sure. And Ken asks, does this apply to FanDuel at all? Again, FanDuel's pricing makes it that it's pretty easy. I would say stick with your normal FanDuel strategy. And after you build your lineups, you're like, I don't have nearly enough of the good plays. The top end running backs, the underperforming receivers. If that's the case, you're like, okay, maybe I have to cut back on some of the expensive stacks. But generally, FanDuel's pricing allows it to not really be an issue. It's more so DraftKings specific, but I think when in doubt, keep it this way. Even on FanDuel, I know I just said this whole thing is mostly DraftKings, but it definitely has some credence on FanDuel too.
Definitely, yeah. And I know it's kind of hard to put it as binary as Random Rules is trying to say, so it's not. And maybe Brian, you can explain it a little bit more better than I could, but it's not necessarily just QB1, RB1, and RB2, or RB3, or stuff like that. It's very stack dependent, like you said.
Yeah, it depends on who the expensive guys are. What the running backs are priced. If the quarterback's super cheap, a lot of times that takes care of itself. But really, it's getting like one of those cheaper wide receiver 2s instead of a wide receiver 1, or mixing in a wide receiver 3 or a cheap tight end or something like that. So yeah, so like Lucky Clover says, by the theory, like D-Rob, 3,200 last couple of weeks. Yeah, D-Rob was in the Millie winning lineup, not this past week, in the week before. Like, very prime example.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, as Bismarck points out, simply put, just make sure you have one cheap ass in every stack.
Yeah, that's the name of the theory. Yeah, cheap ass every stack.
Yeah. And Ken says, and then run it back with Jakeem Grant. Was that a custom stack you had?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like have this epiphany until after this past Sunday. I actually liked Jakeem Grant. I don't know if that was bad or not. I liked him in the spot he was in. And I did custom stacks with all my stacks are custom. I legit have like 60 to 80 custom stacks per week. So, but I think now, especially on DraftKings, I'm gonna be more focused on the cheaper versions of stacks.
Yeah, and random rules. Yeah, you don't always need the wide receiver 1 with your quarterback.
No, it looks good, right? And even if the wide receiver 1 goes off, that means the quarterback's going off. And even if you don't play that wide receiver 1, you can make up those points elsewhere, right? If DeAndre Hopkins scores 30, you can still get 30 from a Dalvin Cook, a Devontae Adams outside the stack. Obviously, he's more likely with his quarterback, but yeah, it's not a requirement by any means.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also have to include, let's say if DK goes off for 30, but the other $3,000 player he has to play scores 0 or 1 or something, then it's a lot easier for you to pick it up with your 2 medium price players.
Right, for sure.
Yep. Willie asked the question, is there any custom rules you set in Classic?
No, very rarely. The way you could do this, if you're not interested in custom stacking and putting like 50 rules of custom stacks in the DFS Magic lineup builder, you could just do a custom rule for each quarterback in your group. So if Patrick Mahomes is in the lineup, minimum 1 of DeMarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman, cheap opposing player. That's one way. Just trying to think of another example. The Josh Allen Seattle game this past week. If Josh Allen quarterback, minimum 1 of Gabriel Davis, tight end maybe, David Moore, DJ Dallas, like cheaper players in that game. So that's the easier way instead of setting like each individual stack. But other than that, I don't actually set any custom rules because there's really not a ton to take care of. As long as you 3x1 stack, get those high volume running backs, get the underperforming receivers in, you're good to go.
Yeah. And Willie says, I like custom stacking, but at 20 max, so I feel like I'm not doing it correctly.
Yeah, for sure. And like 20 max is tough to custom stack. So for that, I would make those easy custom rules. But again, I have to say, like as Bismo says here, this is very slate dependent, and when we have these locks outside of stacks, that takes away all the guesswork of trying to figure out cheap players to fit in. So when we have min price Mike Davis, we just lock button him like we say every time there's a minimum price backup running back. That takes care of it. We can play our stacks as normal this week. Next, or say Christian McCaffrey plays this week, or next week, there's no like very obvious cheap plays. Then we implement this cheap ass stack theory.
Yeah. And Ken says, looking at your exposures, I'm curious as why your player pool was larger than usual past week, and how come you like McCaffrey so much?
Yeah, good questions, Ken. Definitely good questions. The player pool wasn't necessarily intentional. There's a couple more guys I liked than normal this week. But McCaffrey, for me, it was the ownership versus his probability. We know McCaffrey is like a ridiculously good running back, high volume. The pregame reports of them splitting carries was obviously going to impact his ownership some. And when I saw projected ownership 5% for McCaffrey, who's normally priced at like 10K or whatever, we get a $1,500 price savings on him at reduced ownership in a high-scoring game environment. I wanted a good amount of him.
Yeah. Starlord's dad, what's up? Says, do you always have a late night hammer? Seems like the winning lineup has one.
I don't on purpose, or like I don't like actively try to do it. To be honest, I don't even know when the games go off until like I don't know, maybe like 12:30 Sunday when I'm trying to find which games to watch. So no, I don't do it on purpose. I will say it's more exciting with a hammer trying to climb the leaderboards as opposed to being at the top trying to hold off those hammers. So
yeah, definitely. And so we're here we usually here till 10:30, so 5+ or so minutes. I'm going to go ahead and pull up Fantasy Labs contest dashboard, and we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the different duplicates and other stats that we like to look at over here. So let me go ahead and get the logo off the screen. And again, you guys here, DraftKings, FantasyLabs.com, hover over NFL, go to contest dashboard. You can check out a bunch of different sports and a bunch of different contests for different weeks and see what a bunch of other players did. And so if we take a look here, I just go into the leaderboard and solo entry. Always love to see the solo entry winners.
Yeah, the top of the leaderboards are kind of crazy this week, and we saw that with the Millie, where the top 4 slots were all people who had 5 entries or less.
Look at this sick lineup, though.
I know, it's pretty sick. You gotta give it to him.
Yeah.
Cheap stack piece, Jerry Jeudy, only 4,700, so it kind of counts.
Yeah, definitely. So Motorsports, congrats to him. And if we look at duplicate lineups, I think it actually shows a little bit better up here on screen. Not that much of a, if we count by duplicate users, 59, 54, and 51 use Josh Allen.
That sounds about right. I believe that.
Yeah, and
very popular.
Anytime I sort, Fantasy Labs, like, the tooltip breaks, so can't really see the full lineup.
Sick. Okay.
Go to salary distribution. Take a look, and again, if I don't do like a whole bunch of crazy stuff, it just doesn't show. You might be able to see it better here if I zoom out. And yeah, majority of people, 50, 60, 70, 80, like 90% of people used $500 or less.
And it makes sense. It kind of fits with what we've been talking about. Like, the pricing is tight. Like, very rarely can you just leave a bunch of money on the table and have a good lineup on DraftKings NFL Classic.
Definitely. Ken has a question. Would you have preferred to have more Dalvin? I tried to get him in as much as possible, but it was tough.
Not necessarily. I mean, of course he crushed again. I didn't expect him to score 30+ points or whatever. I liked a lot of running backs in good spots. So, James Robinson, David Johnson, some of the cheaper guys. I wasn't trying to force him in. I wanted to at least match the field, maybe have a little more. But yeah, I agree. It was kind of tough to get him in, and that just guys like Cook and Kamara and McCaffrey and Aaron Jones, when they're on the slate, you want to get them in your tournament lineups, and just another reason to try to get in cheaper stacks if you can.
Definitely. Brandon Roll says, this strat is interesting because in my many non-main stacks, I'm sometimes looking for secondary players. This says I try and find secondary pieces within your main stack.
Yeah, again, it's still an unproven theory, but founded in a lot of common sense and a lot of anecdotal evidence, and we're going to dive deep on this, but it makes sense to get those cheap options in the high-scoring game environments.
Absolutely. And Ken says Patrick Laird was not the move, IMO.
So let me explain what happened here. So I had 20% Tony Pollard on both sites. Mm-hmm. I didn't think Zeke was going to play. Even the encouraging pregame news Sunday morning, I was like, I still don't think he's going to play. So I'm going to get my 20% Tony Pollard. And I knew that he wouldn't be highly owned at all just because he was the 4 o'clock game. People wouldn't have news. They're not going to risk a lineup spot on him. I also knew that Miami had 2 minimum price running back options, Jordan Howard, Patrick Laird. Mm-hmm. So what I said, okay, I'll play Tony Pollard. I'll wait till 3:30. If Zeke's in, I'll just swap out to one of the two. None were great options in hindsight, but I had a plan in place for if Zeke was active, what to do. If there was 0 4K running backs at 4 o'clock, I probably wouldn't have played it. Or maybe I would have rolled the dice, I don't know. Yeah. But I did have a backup plan in place.
Exactly, yeah. Ed, what's up, Ed? Something late. What's the big reveal? Not gonna tell you, Ed. You have to watch the replay. Only for you, Ed.
I'll say more because I have a feeling we have
I'm joking.
A decent amount of people joining late. So just a quick recap, because of the pricing structures on DraftKings, because of how wide the salary ranges are, 3K to 9K, 3K to 10K on DraftKings compared to FanDuel, because of the PPR and the bonuses that allow this to happen. Basically, if you're stacking a game, you either want a balanced stack, so no elite players inside of your stack, still 3x1 stacking. An example of a balanced stack was this Jacksonville-Houston game last week. Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, DJ Chark, Jake Luton, Deshaun Watson, whatever. None of those guys are that expensive. That's fine. The expensive stacks like Kansas City, Seattle, Buffalo. If you have an expensive stack, use at least one cheap player in that stack instead of forcing in the expensive players. Instead of trying to find scrubs to fit around them, play a scrub or a medium-priced player in the stack in a game environment we expect to shoot out with good quarterbacks, as opposed to trying to find guys outside the stacks. So that's the big theory. It's mostly for DraftKings.
Makes sense. Cool. Yeah, Notice says, imagine not using Jordan Howard. Bro has like a touchdown every 4 touches.
I did. That's who I swapped to on FanDuel. I swapped from Pollard to Howard on FanDuel. Swapped to Laird on DraftKings. Neither one scored that many points.
Yeah. Spirals says, what's your best strategy for single entry GPPs?
Yep, it's pick the game that you expect to have the most points or expect to have the most fantasy points. You pick 3 players from one side, including the quarterback, 1 from the other side. Fit in 2 or 3 high volume running backs. Fit in as many underperforming receivers as you can. Fill in the best tight ends in defense. That's literally it. That's my entire strategy. I would do the same thing for one lineup.
Yeah. Willie says, for your strategy, does that include the bring back player as well? Example,
Yeah,
Curtis Samuel instead of DJ.
It makes more sense. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it makes more sense to include it in the 3-man, but it also works if it's the cheap 1-man as well. Like this past week, you could do Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, plus Curtis Samuel, and that relieves some salary for you.
Yep. E says, did you have any D. Montgomery? I couldn't get off him and felt like he was a bad play, but kept him in because he was high in the model.
Yeah, of course I had him. Like his usage is still pretty insane for his price. If you look at expected touchdowns, he's expected to have scored 7 or 8 touchdowns this year based on his opportunity. He scored 2, I think 2 or 3. So he's going to continue to rate high in the model. Granted, he's not that great. Not breaking tackles that much. Offensive line hasn't been providing much. But his usage in the passing game at that price and his workload share is too much to ignore. So I understand if you want to play less of him. Just understand why he's going to rank high in the model.
Yeah, and yeah, Willie says Montgomery's the new AJ Green. Rip.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Random says 20 max question. With a guy like Mike Davis at 4K, more often than not, have him in all 20 lineups?
Yes, definitely. I'm going to have him in 100% of my 150 next week, assuming McCaffrey's out. But we talk about this a couple times this season. If you get the cheap, min-price, backup running back, who plays in the passing game? Big difference here. Plays in the passing game. Just lock button them. Look at all the pros, what they do. 95% plus exposure in all of their lineups. So we're going to do the same thing for our 20 max and our 150s.
Yep, absolutely. Haggard says kind of like a 2.5 to 1 or a 3-0.5 stack instead of 3-1. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Kind of a 2.5 on stack. I mean, it's still a guy. And like, if the guy goes off, like, you're looking good. David Moore gets a touchdown, puts up 15 points at 3K or whatever. You're looking great. Because, again, there's still correlation with the quarterback.
Yep. Cool. All right, so at 10:32, if you have any last lingering questions, get them out, and then we'll get up out of here. Let's take a look really quick. I'm going to wait for the questions to come in. I'm going to look at the position usage in the Millie. 52% wide receiver, 36% running back, and 12% tight end. That's always fun to see.
That's crazy. I think second in the middle, you got a double tight end lineup, so shout out to that person.
Oh, wow. Definitely shout out. Cool. All right, so let me go ahead and put the logo back up, and I'll answer these last couple questions. Let's see. Jayhawk says, why is Watson so cheap on FanDuel? He's going to pop.
Yeah, kind of the similar thing we've been talking about. Like, FanDuel's pricing is always pretty easy compared to most things, and that game environment's another shootout environment, so yeah, super cheap.
Yeah. So Ken, just clicking through some of the pros exposures, looks about 40 to 80% of Julio. Any thoughts, and why do you think you had enough with 30% slash match in the field?
Yeah, I probably should have had a little more, for being honest. We talked about it on Saturday stream, how good of a spot he was in. Again, most pros still don't 3x1 stack enough, so they end up with more exposure to outside stack receivers than I will. Very rarely for me am I going to be able to get 30+% of a receiver, just overall, just based on my strategy and our recommended strategy. So for me, it was a good amount. He was my highest exposed receiver. I was okay with it, or second highest next to Jerry Jeudy.
Cool. What's up, Hey Sports Fans? Says, what are the best secondary and tertiary stack types? Running back slash opposing wide receiver, RB, DST.
Yeah, receiver, opposing receiver, running back, defense are the two main ones.
And Notem points out double tight ends the new meta.
Yeah, always changing meta.
Yeah. Willie asks, is there a breakdown of what number of running backs, wide receivers, tight ends to include in a 20 max pool? Feels like sometimes my pool is too wide in certain positions.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you what I do for 150. It's roughly like 7 to 10 running backs and like 25 to 35 receivers, 5 to 8 tight ends, 5 to 7 defenses. So for 20 max, you're going to cut that down considerably. 4 to 6 running backs, 15 to 20 receivers, 3 to 5 tight ends, 2 to 4 defenses. Like really cut it down. You're gonna have to make some tough decisions, but you're much better off in the long run doing that.
Yeah, and I would say with that, you're able to, with only 20 lineups, you're still able to get, I don't know if you're in DFS Magic or however you build your lineup, you should be able to at least get a big picture of your lineups with looking at your exposure. It's like, all right, where are there gaps? Like, where am I not taking enough stands? Where if this pops off, I still need something else to pop off and something else to pop off, so I'm spreading myself too thin.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. So you try building first and then cutting down afterwards.
Yep. Spirals. What would you say is the easiest contest type to win money on DraftKings?
Nothing's easy. Let's just put that out there. But the best return for your money, the best return on investment, they're called contests. I don't know why they call them that. Literally search the word contest in the lobby. You can get 25-cent, dollar, $5, up to $100 and some dollars. Anywhere from 20 people to 500 people. Really balanced payouts. Don't have to beat a ton of people compared to the big tournaments. We call them leagues. DraftKings calls them contests.
And also, keep track of what you're good at. So, you may be good at leagues, but you may only be good at 100-player leagues or 500-player leagues. Again, everyone has their own differences. So, definitely keep track of what you're good at and hammer that.
Yes,
absolutely. Yep. Let's see. All right, let's knock out these last couple of questions. Bismo says, cheap Irv Smith ran incredibly hot with touchdown variants on a week with a lot of tight end duds. Annoying as fuck. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he ran like 12 routes and had 2 touchdowns or something stupid.
Lit. Lucky says, Brian, how do you attack defense in mass multi-entry? Do you ever go all in or split among a few?
No, unless I was like Chris, who was so confident in the Dolphins defense a couple weeks ago. No, I literally just take the top, I don't know, 5 to 8 defenses in the model. That's literally all I do. I don't do anything else. I know we talk about transparency here. I do literally nothing else. I just look at the top defenses in the model and have some sort of balanced exposure to them. Let the lineup builder do the balanced exposing. If I get one that's like 50%, I'll reduce the maximum exposure. But really, just get like 10 to 30% of the top, 5 to 7 defenses.
Yeah. The only thing I would ask a question for you about that is, what if you're playing a running back or a stack or something that contradicts the top of my order? I mean, like, I know when I'm building my 150, I will actually take out a defense if it ranks top in the model if I know it's going to counteract a big stack of mine, or if I'm playing a big running back, something like that.
Right, that makes sense. If you're making like 1,000 lineups, sure, you could do that. But if you're making 150 and a third of your lineups have a stack for a game, does it really make sense to waste that defense, the opposing defense, and the other 66% of your lineups? Yeah, I get that's a good point.
Hagley says, I wonder if your research will find a max dollar for optimal 3-1 stacks, like diminishing returns about a 24K total salary for the main stack or something.
There probably is something, but again, everything is so slate dependent. I hate like salary based analysis just because each slate has different context. Was there a min price running back? Were there a lack of high price running backs because of the schedule setup or whatever it may be? So I don't know if we can pinpoint an exact number. It's going to be a fluid feel situation every week.
It's almost like those when you go to the sports book and you see the trend sheet. Washington is 7-0. The last time the wind blew 10 miles an hour and plays at home. It's so hard to just pinpoint certain things over a long period of time like that. Let's see. Noam says, what I suggest people do, this should be interesting, is after slate, do view contests and look a lot of them and note top 3 scores and see what wins what.
Yeah, and again, this is survivorship bias too. We're just looking at what the winning lineup did as opposed to what the top 0.1% did, the top 1% did, compared to what the field did. So yeah, it's definitely, if you see that the winner of a lineup did a 3x2 stack for whatever reason, and you're like, oh wow, I needed to do 3x2 stacks, but for some reason the field all did 3x2 stacks is a very like off the wall example. It doesn't really tell us much. So yeah, trying to compare it to the top 1% versus what the field did is the most important in breaking down GPP results.
Definitely. Yeah, a bunch of people shitting on David Montgomery and Justin Jackson. So, rip.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Raditar, what's up? Glad you're here. And Helmy's follow says, shit, I just got here. Did you win 60K?
Yeah, technically I got cheated out. Not cheated. I got unlucky out of 1 million and 60K, but we'll take the 60K win. So.
Yep, absolutely. So, so that I think will do it. Brian, is there any last words that you want to talk about or anything?
No, we talked about a lot of stuff. Again, if you have questions, we're in the Discord most of the time. Most of this is probably in the DFS Magic channel of the Discord. Mm-hmm. But this just goes to show this final point here. I literally won 65K, and the next morning I was researching edges for DraftKings. Right, like this is a non-stop thing. This is always about self-improvement. We talked about it on yesterday's stream, but just to rehash that, like we're trying to relay the information to you. But you know, don't get complacent with a big win. Always try to improve. Figure out how you can improve because it's a never-changing game. As Nodum says, the meta is always evolving.
Absolutely. Yep. So I think that does it. If we didn't answer your question, I'm pretty sure literally everyone here is on the Discord. Golf stream tomorrow will be at 10 o'clock, and got something special for you there too.
Super special surprise.
Super eye emoji there. So, all right, guys. So, Moose and Brian from Occupy Fantasy until tomorrow, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Peace out.